Hello, everyone. On today's podcast, Apoorva Murari will be taking us through her professional journey. Apoorva was trained as an engineer at Bharatiya Vidyapeeth University and began her development sector journey with organizations like Teach for India and Indus Action. She managed recruitment efforts at TFI over a span of almost 3 years and was the campaign lead at Indus Action, where she was in charge of several facets of public education enrollment campaigns. Post these experiences, she pursued her master's as a Chevening Scholar at the Institute of Development Studies and has been working in governance consulting for the past 3.5 years, first at Samagra and now at U Chicago's International Innovation Corps. Thank you so much for joining us at Career and Development, Apoorva.
Absolutely. So thank you for having me.
Sure. My very first question is a very obvious one. So, you went from studying engineering to becoming a social impact professional. How and why did you make that decision?
Right. Honestly, I don't think that engineering was a conscious choice. It just happened. It was just something you did. You took science in 11th and 12th and you studied engineering. But on graduation, I had a few job offers and I had a few business school admits, but neither of those excited me. And I was just drawn to the development sector. And as vague as that sounds, I actually just decided to take a leap and experiment with it. I wasn't very confident. I had a hunch, but I decided to experiment with the space. And the kind of justification I gave to myself was, you know what, if I don't like this, I can apply to a business school again in a few years. And, if I got in the first time, I believed that I was likely to get in again. So my jump into this space was an exploration rather than a leap with absolute conviction.
That makes sense, and I think that's a good way to go about it. Your very first job in this space was with a significantly large organization, that's Teach for India. So there you were in charge of the fellow recruitments, right? So how did that set you up for what you did going forward in your journey?
Right. So interestingly, when I had joined Teach for India, it was still a very fresh and a young organization. It was only 2 years old nationally, and it was in its first year in Delhi. So it was definitely not the mammoth movement that it is today. And as part of the recruitment team, I think that we were in fact responsible for building TFI's presence and brand across colleges and corporate campuses nationally. To find some of the brightest and most motivated individuals for the classrooms. And I'd like to believe that our initial work contributed to the foundation of building Teach for India's presence, as well as the numbers and quality of candidates that it sees today. But in Teach for India, I was far away from the classroom, but I interacted with fellows quite often. I visited their classrooms, I spoke to them about their own journeys. And to me, that is my biggest takeaway from Teach for India. It was just the people. I was absolutely inspired by the sheer drive and round the clock hard work that I saw from them. And it was the first time that I started to believe that working in the development space could actually create an impact. And since then, I've happy to say that I've been proven right about this time and again, as I see Teach for India alumni among the many, many other people that I've since interacted with, making a difference through positions in government, founding organizations, working on policy, working with communities, and just so on.
Great. So once you were convinced that you wanted to, stay in the development sector, you moved to Indus Action, where the focus of your work was more on their key programs related to school readiness and enrollment campaigns. So, can you share a bit about what your day-to-day responsibilities look like at Indus Action?
Right. So the main reason I shifted to Indus Action was that I wanted to move a little closer to the on-ground action. And Indus Action focused on, and it still does, it focuses on empowering citizens to claim their rights. It provides information as well as assistance to citizens about government schemes or benefits of policies that they might be eligible for. So as part of Indus Action then, we worked on Section 12(1)(c) of the Right to Education Act, which mandates the reservation of 25% of seats in private schools for students from economically and historically socially disadvantaged communities. And each year, the enrollment process opened up for these seats, but barely any got taken. And the challenge was that very few people even knew about these schemes. And that's what Indus Action wanted to change through the enrollment campaigns. So for the years that I was at Indus Action, we focused on enrollment campaigns within Delhi. The campaign was driven by a few full-time staff members and a lot of volunteers. We would easily have 300 to 400 volunteers over a rolling 4-month period. And so how we worked was that we first identified areas in the city where we believed that the target population lived or they worked. So it could be areas like Murari in North Delhi, or Silampur in East Delhi, or Sangam Bihar in the South. And then we disseminated information systematically in as many ways as we could. So posters, pamphlets, door-to-door volunteer campaigns, loudspeakers blaring off of autos and rickshaws, SMS blasts from employers, collaboration with other organizations that were working on ground. And we also ran a helpline number that people could call for more information or support to apply. And so that's what the day-to-day was. We designed information campaigns, we mobilized volunteers, we established partnerships, we ran calling banks, and we tracked the numbers every day. How many had we reached? How many people had called us? How many people had successfully applied? How many people needed support with documents? So that's the work that we did every day. And also once, over the first year, and once we saw that there were some students in school, we also realized that they needed support to stay in school as well as succeed there. It was a very different environment that they were suddenly being immersed in. And that's when we ran a few school readiness pilots as well, where we worked with children, the target population of 3 to 6 year olds, to equip them with the basic academic and social skills that they needed to start successfully. And in running the pilot end to end, we had partners who designed the curriculum, partners who implemented them in summer schools, and an entire team managing training and monitoring. So that's what Indus Action looked like.
That sounds wonderful. And I'm guessing that the end-to-end initiative management and working directly with beneficiary groups would have put you right in the middle of on-ground action like you wanted, and which was the reason that you moved to this organization. So were there any realizations from working directly at the grassroots in a programmatic capacity?
Yeah, I mean, just first to your previous point about me being in the thick of things, I agree with that, right? And that experience, one, it just exposed me to the communities that we want to work for, and as well as a lot of skill sets with so much autonomy that we operated with, and the freedom to completely design something. Also came a lot of initial stresses, but eventual development of skill sets such as people management, such as recruitment, such as branding, and such as oddly like managing operations of a helpline. So it was definitely an interesting experience. And with respect to realizations, my biggest realization was that accessing even rights that are technically already yours is not easy. That there are several systemic barriers that prevent it. It could be asymmetric information. It could be not having the right documents. It could be not having, provisions that allowed you time to get the necessary documents that you needed. So there were just a lot of barriers that prevented people from even accessing the rights, especially if you didn't know about them already and you couldn't assertively demand for them. And the changing any of those ecosystem barriers requires active collaboration with the government. So while at Indus Action, we tried to establish a working relationship with the government, and they have fantastic relationships as an organization now. In those initial times, I, at least personally, felt like an outsider trying to break in, and also that I just couldn't. So I think those were my few takeaways.
And is that what prompted the move to governance consulting?
Yes, I think the working with the governments was then a natural progression for me. And I had realized by that time the importance of working in collaboration with the government instead of trying to break down doors from the outside. You just get a lot more done. Also, it just happened that I took a break from my master's just before this transition. And that time allowed me to reflect, learn about, think about, write some papers on some national policies and programs. And I had come to believe that governments largely, have good intentions, and that policies are mostly well designed. I mean, sure, there's scope to strengthen them, think about inclusivity, and I know that there are those gaps, but mostly the intent is right. And one of the few gaps that persisted is that they were not being implemented effectively. And that's why I decided to try governance consulting. Both Samagra and International Innovation Corps do excellent work with the government partners. They assist with the design, thoughtful design, user-centric design, based on research, to design projects, as well as to ensure effective implementation on the ground. And I genuinely believe that these teams add value to the projects that they collaborate on.
Right. I'm sure that would have been a good transition because, like you said, both those organizations work heavily on implementation and not just policy design and initiative design.
I think that there's definitely role for people in policy design as well. I do think that it takes a lot of thought and effort and thinking about inclusivity, thinking about monitoring, thinking about indicators, etc. Even when policy is being designed, it's just that I chose implementation because I felt like it aligned more with my skill sets as well as my interest, within the larger domain. So I definitely think there's value in policy design extensively as well. It's just that implementation is where I felt I could add most or achieve the most.
Right. How was this role different from the ones that you had done before?
Right. The key difference is that, when you're working with governments, you're working with the same advantages, but also the same challenges that they operate with. So the advantage is, yes, you have the ability to influence the system. And the fact that a minor influence or a minor change also happens at a massive, massive scale. So changing a couple of provisions of a policy directly affects, say, 50,000 teachers or 15,000 schools. And but that itself then becomes a challenge when you're designing that policy or the program, right? You think about working with limited resources. You know what? We actually just don't have enough people, or we don't have enough money for this. You have to think about how heterogeneous your polity is. You can't just design a blanket policy without thinking about, is this excluding someone? Am I thinking about, have I thought through about some barriers that may prevent people from accessing this? Right? There's also heavy bureaucracy. So things will take time. It does need paperwork. It does need to make sure that budgets are approved. You can't just do it very quickly, right? There are political priorities that interfere. So theoretically, this might be the right thing to do, but politically, there might be other priorities as well. So you contest with those. And then there's unique geographies. Just as an example, when as part of my work at Samagra, when we worked at Himachal Pradesh, you had to think about the fact that there was some valleys or geographic areas that got cut off for almost 6 months a year. So we had to think about how will information get there, how will material get there. So you have to think about the unique geographies that you contest with as well. Things move slower, but when they do, it is a victory.
Yeah, I agree. And the point that you made about heterogeneity of audiences and beneficiaries is a very insightful one. And I think that's something that scale probably needs to include in the program design itself. To probe you further, for someone who's new to governance consulting, can you share what work at IIC looks like, both as a fellow and at a senior position such as yours?
Right. So IIC has a very interesting model. The first objective is to work on solving some of the most pressing development challenges, but also it wants to focus on building future leaders in this development ecosystem. So we place teams of 3 to 4 fellows, each with a lead, on projects with different government entities, such as Niti Aayog, or state departments or national departments. It could be in domains of health, it could be education. And these teams work on diverse mandates, such as AI policy, large-scale education transformation, urban health. So it could be any of these. And IIC also has a program called Young Leaders in Tech Policy that focuses on tech policy specifically. So over the years, fellows work on baseline assessments, they design programs, they design pilot and implement them, and subsequently scale it up, monitoring and evaluation. So all of this is within the purview of one team within a year. And for me personally, I lead 3 to 4 such projects at any given time. And in addition, I support organizational priorities such as new project development or fellow professional development, stakeholder management, as well as recruitment.
Another thing that I found interesting across your career journey is that a common theme across the different roles that you have worked in has been education. Has that been a conscious choice? And if yes, why did you choose to focus on this particular issue?
Right. I owe a lot to my school and my education. Even after nearly 15 years of graduating from school, it's a long time ago. And I've since, studied at other places. I've been part of other organizations, but I still believe that no other single institution has influenced me as much as it. My skills, my interest, my confidence, I should say, a curiosity, or, look at the world. I think all of that started there. And it's not just me. I see it in so many of my school friends as well. And all this has done is to just bolster my belief that education, and specifically school education, shapes a person for life. And hence, I've worked in education for a fair bit. And but having said that, I do have interests in other areas of like public health or early childhood care. I unfortunately just haven't had the chance to explore them yet.
Across all your roles at TFI, Indus Action, Samagra, and now IIC, what have you loved the most about your work? I mean, not necessarily in the space of education, but throughout your journey in the development sector. And what aspects did you like the least?
Right. I would have to say that what I love is the problem statements and the people. To me, the problem statements, they're real, they're visible. I see them around me. The urgency to solve them is real. And the second would be the people that I work with and the people that I work for. That's the beneficiaries. And of course, needless to say, it's the peppering of the small victories. It helps as well. What do I like the least? Sometimes I do feel quite dejected. I feel like, does my work make a difference? And that despite so many smart and motivated people in the sector, impact is potentially not as moving as fast as it should. And again, like, should is a big word. Who knows how fast it should move? But it sometimes does make me question what I'm doing, if what I'm doing is the right thing. And then I'm not sure what the right answer is. And I don't mean to dissuade anyone from the sector. These are just questions that come time and again. And but the sector in large has definitely been inspiring as well as rewarding for me. But there are days when I question the whats and the whys of it all.
Of course, and plus, I think it's always helpful to understand the whole picture through different individual experiences. So, next, I want to discuss your experience pursuing higher education in this space. You completed a postgraduate degree in between your career transitions, right? So, how did you make a decision on where, when, and what to pursue a master's in?
So I really enjoyed the work that I did, but I also realized that I didn't really know the field at all. I mean, the last time I'd studied any social sciences was, probably 10 years before. And I didn't know what the field entailed, what were the different approaches to development, what are different schools of thought, what are different fields within the larger domain of development, or the principles of policy design or public administration. And I only knew the two experiences that I had been in. And so it was a no-brainer for me that I needed to study all of this to be an effective development practitioner. But when it actually came to studying, my first step was to find a program I wanted to study. And to decide that, I spent a lot of time visiting the college websites. I found the top ranked colleges in the world, and I looked at their courses on development studies. I looked at public policy, public administration, and similar courses. And then I looked at the modules that they offered, the professors who taught there, where the alumni was right now. I spoke to the alumni about their experiences during as well as after the program. And as I did all of these steps, I realized that I was drawn to programs grounded in practice as opposed to research. And that also helped me pick the colleges as well as the programs that I applied to. The second thing I did was after I received the offers, I was looking at funding. I knew I didn't want to take a hefty loan because I wanted to come back to India and work. And I didn't want to be constrained for having to choose my job based solely on compensation. And I was thankfully very fortunate to receive several tuition waivers and finally the Chevening Scholarship as well.
Going in, what did you expect from the IDS experience and what did you actually gain from it?
Right. So I opted for a master's in development studies, and I was largely expecting three things. The first was an introduction to the different aspects of development, economics, democracy, social protection programs. The second thing was concrete skills, things like monitoring and evaluation. And finally was just learning from my global peers. And I feel like through the program, I also hope to get some clarity on my own areas of interest within development. And I feel like I got all of those. In hindsight, I think what could have helped me more was if I had some period for an internship, a chance to, within the course of what I'm studying, apply what I had learned. And that probably would have helped me refine either what I would, the modules I would take after that, or the kind of field I went into work. So yeah, I think that would have helped me a little bit.
Right. And based on your experiences of what went well and what didn't, would you have any thoughts or advice for development sector enthusiasts who are also thinking about a master's in policy or development studies?
Yeah, I think primarily find a program that you like and make sure you're not picking a program just because it's ranked well. So go through the curriculum, look at the modules that they teach, and make sure you're interested in it, right? Don't just be in it for the rank. The second thing, talk to alumni. Talk to them about their experience during the program. Talk to them about their experience of looking for a job. Look for a breakdown of what alumni is currently doing. And that should give you a sense of whether that specific program and university will take you where you want to go.
Before I let you go, I want to hear about your reflections from your entire development sector career journey. So on that front, my first question is, what have been your biggest lessons or takeaways from this journey?
The first would be collaborate. There are several people in organizations that might be trying to achieve the similar goals as you are. And this will prompt knowledge sharing. It'll eliminate the duplication of work. And there's already scarce resources in this sector. It'll make sure that there's effective utilization of those scarce resources. Don't try and compete with similar minded organizations, but build on each other's work as well as ambitions, as well as the groundwork that might have already been laid. The second would be that scale is not the only metric to strive for. When you're in pursuit of scale, don't forget to look at the quality of the impact you're making. And if you so choose, you can also abandon scale as a metric completely and decide to work with one or two communities and create a deep impact. So, just work through everything. So education, sanitation, skills, employment, all of them in the same place. And you're very likely to create ripple effects through this impact. So don't think of impact only in terms of scale. Also think about sustainability. Don't pick an intervention just because it's using technology or because everyone's doing it or because you think it's the easiest thing right now to implement. Think about, will that intervention survive when you leave? Will people still do what you're asking them to do if no one is monitoring them? What behavior change or training do you need to ensure sustainable interventions? So those are the three things. Collaborate, scale is not your only metric, and think about sustainability.
Thanks, Purva. I knew the many years of diverse work experiences would allow you to bring a very holistic response to this question. So I'm glad we were able to cover that. My final question is a related one. When you look back to your career journey as a whole and not necessarily in this sector, what do you wish the 20-year-old you had known back then?
So I don't think I explicitly chased this over the years, but upon reflection, I feel I've been fortunate enough to always have this. Work for a mission that you believe in and surround yourself with people that you like, respect, but more also equally importantly, that people that you can learn from.
Thank you so much, Apoorva. You have had quite an impactful and varied journey in this space and experienced many aspects of what it has to offer. I'm sure that our conversation would be helpful for those aiming for similar directions or trajectories in their work towards creating impact. So thank you for being here, and it was wonderful having you.
Thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity to share.